So for those who are participating, once we get to questions,
if you have a question, what you could do is you would just raise your hand, and to do that you would go to the top bar, and there's a little man in the middle of the screen in the top black bar, and if you hover over that and click to the arrow to the right of it, and raise your hand, and in the same way you can also lower your hand as well if you have a question.
So that we'll be able to tell the chair who's next in line with questions. So with that, Claire, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Very well.
Yes, you can. Very well. That's good. If you can't, then if people could let us know, that would be helpful, because I'm going to keep it on hands-free. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. And I think we've got people joining us today for this webinar from across the country. And I thank you all for your interest and for taking the time to be online with us today. My name is Claire Betker, and I live in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And as all good prairie people do, I'm looking at the sky, and it's a beautiful sunny day in here in Manitoba, dry, albeit. So our discussion today is focusing on the proposed changes to the Canadian Nurses Association's membership structure. And I'm going to give a bit of comments, and online we have Megan Wallace, our legal counsel, as well as Mike Villeneuve, the Chief Executive Officer of CNA, as well as some of our other staff. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the why, the how, and what it means for nursing in Canada, and what are our next steps. But first, I just really want to reinforce and note that the work I'm about to share with you has been led by the Canadian Nurses Association Board of Directors, an incredibly dedicated and hardworking group, and by the board's Governance and Leadership Committee, which is part of the board. There's board members on it, as well as some of our staff, and myself as chair in the President-elect's role. So a really big thank you to the board and to the committee and to our advisors, our legal counsel, as we've moved ahead. And they've had many thoughtful deliberations and further contributions to this work. So first, just to let you know that they are online, so if you do have a question along the way, please ask it. And Debbie, I'm going to ask you to watch those comments as they come in, or questions, and we can stop at any point and answer them. So there isn't any need to wait till the very end. And I'm going to invite Michael and Megan and others, if you think you'd like to chime in, go ahead. So we've scheduled an hour together, and I'm going to provide the overview, and as I said, invite questions as we go along. This session is being recorded for those who can't attend today, so you can point people towards that, or for those of you who are online and would like to review it for clarification as we move forward. And that recording should be up in the next couple of days. So the intention of the webinar is to educate voting delegates, members, and nurses throughout Canada about the proposed changes to CNA's membership structure. Specifically, the Canadian Nurses Association is pursuing a plan to expand its membership beyond registered nurses and nurse practitioners by changing its membership structure to include registered psychiatric nurses and licensed or registered practical nurses in the professional association. Since its beginning, more than 100 years ago, actually 110 years ago, in 1908, the Canadian Nurses Association has been the national professional voice of registered nurses, which of course includes nurse practitioners. Now the association is envisioning representing all nurses. By that we mean all regulated nursing designations that exist in Canada. So registered nurses, nurse practitioners, registered psychiatric nurses, which are educated and licensed only in BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and the Yukon, and practical nurses, which are referred to as registered practical nurses in Ontario and licensed practical nurses in other provinces and territories. And the proposal is to open up CNA's membership. That proposal will be brought forward to voting delegates at the June 18th, 2018 Annual General Meeting of Members. So I'd like to provide a bit of context and a bit of background for this membership expansion. There's been changes in several provinces, as well as the real need and, of course, the benefit of collaboration within and among nursing. And those are the real catalysts for the decision to propose the CNA membership changes. There's been a decision in British Columbia to unite the 4 regulated nursing categories under one new regulatory body, the BC College of Nursing Professionals. And the real piece that makes a difference here is that at the same time, the nurses and nurse practitioners of British Columbia have formed a single nursing organization representing every single nurse in British Columbia. So LPNs, registered psychiatric nurses, RNs, and nurse practitioners. And this particular professional association will ensure every nursing category has an equal voice on nursing issues in British Columbia, support them to work together for the health and the well-being of people living in British Columbia. But the formation or establishment of that nurses and nurse practitioners of British Columbia Association means that CNA's current jurisdictional member in BC, the Association of Registered Nurses of British Columbia, will no longer exist. So the new association in BC will have that comprehensive membership of nurses, and so that's really one of the catalysts, if you will, or the triggers for this proposed membership changes. So what would happen in British Columbia is that under CNA's long-standing governance structure, which requires that organizations be made up of registered nurses and nurse practitioners, then the BC Association is no longer eligible to be that jurisdictional member under the current bylaws. So we would need to change those bylaws. So while that's the catalyst, as I said, that long-standing fragmentation of professional nursing is another strong motivating factor, and one that really spoke to the Board of Directors of the Canadian Nurses Association. And we also need to remember that there are similar changes being contemplated or actually occurring as we speak in other jurisdictions, for example, Nova Scotia. We know, and the research provides the evidence, that a lack of unity and a lack of collaboration within nursing has had negative implications at the practice, at the organizational, and at the larger systems level, and I would also suggest at the policy level. So, the Canadian Nurses Association sees this current context as a strategic opportunity for nurses to come together, to bring their voices together within a united national professional association. Okay, so my next section is to talk a little bit about the proposed changes, but I just wonder, Debbie, is there any comments or questions being asked at this time?
Not at this time.
Okay, so I'll remind people online that if they have questions, to please just type them in so that we can answer them as we go. So excuse me. So the proposed changes. So all of this brings us to the proposal to change CNA's membership structure. The changes will expand the existing membership, as I said, to include licensed or registered practical nurses and registered psychiatric nurses. So in the information package that you have, those specifics, those things that will need to be changed are detailed. And they include 2 things that need to be approved at the meeting in June. First of all, a change to the Articles of Continuance, and secondly, a change to the bylaws. Because both of those documents contain the same language regarding membership structure, so they both need to be formally amended at the annual general meeting in June in Ottawa. So, a high-level overview of the key amendments then. So first of all, we're proposing bylaws, a change to the CNA bylaws that broadens the word so that registered nurses are not the only nursing designation that's referred to throughout those bylaws. So wherever registered nurse is written in the bylaws right now, the wording will be revised, if this is passed, the proposal is passed, to nurse. It also broadens the wording so that a student body does not only refer to a body that represents nursing students enrolled in educational programs for entry to practice as registered nurses. The wording is revised to nursing students enrolled in educational programs for entry to practice as a nurse. It'll also mean adjusting the names of the membership classes. And currently, the membership classes are referred to as classes A, B, C, and D, each of those followed by a descriptive name. For example, we say Class D members, family of nursing. And that this system of using both class designations and specific names for each class has been identified by many, actually, as confusing and unnecessary. So given this, the proposed changes include removal of the class designation and going forward using just the descriptive terms. So as an example, wherever Class A members, jurisdictional members, is written, the wording will be revised to jurisdictional members. This amendment does not change any of the rights or obligations of CNA's members, but it does simplify the terms that are used to refer to such members. Because all the proposed amendments are fundamental changes within the meaning of the Canada Not-for-Profit Corporations Act, they must be approved by what is called a special resolution, or 2/3 of the voting members at a meeting of members. You can look at Appendix A of your information package, and there you're going to find every proposed change to the bylaws, and it's indicated in track changes, so you can actually see them in color.
Claire, we do have a question from Mary Smith.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Mary. So go ahead, Debbie. Do you want to read it?
No, she can speak. She's...
Oh,
hi.
Can
you hear me?
Mary.
Hi.
Yeah.
None of the slides are advancing for me, so I'm just not sure. Are you still on just your title slide?
Yes, there are no slides per se. If there is a need to put something particular up, we will. That's in the document.
Wonderful. Okay, thanks so much. I was worried that I wasn't truly connected then. Okay, thank you.
So Mary, all of those changes, as I said, it's Claire here. You can look in Appendix A of that PDF document that was there for you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so are there any other questions? Or Megan, is there something, I love the way you speak to it, and you do it much better than me. Do you want to add anything about that, the classes and the designations and the language?
I think you've set it out really clearly, Claire. I think you nailed it. I don't have anything to add.
Okay, well, I listened hard in those board meetings, and we asked a lot of questions in our governance and leadership committee, and we also had some pretty in-depth conversations at the board. Okay, so then the next thing I really wanted to tell you about is a little bit more about the involvement of the Board of Directors, because this really was driven by our Canadian Nurses Association Board of Directors. So the proposal to expand CNA membership was discussed at the board meeting in November. And at that time, BC was either in the midst of or really strongly signaling some of their changes. And at that meeting, the CNA board unanimously approved a motion to bring it forward to voting delegates at the June 18th, 2018 annual meeting of members. Since then, CNA has been consulting with members and with stakeholders on the proposal. And we used an online survey as well as presentations and discussions at meetings and conferences across the country. And Barb and Michael in particular Barb Shelley and our president and Michael in particular have been at many and made a real concerted effort to be present at the annual general meetings of members and at other conferences to answer questions. And we've heard many thoughtful ideas, many pieces of advice, and many critical questions and that have been tabled. And so far, responses to the opinion survey indicate that many nurses believe that a united profession is long overdue. However, some feel that distinct nursing voices could be diluted under this membership proposal. So there's 4 kind of themes within the concerns, and so anybody who knows me knows that I like to go to the solutions and to the strengths, but I am going to talk, because I think this is a really pivotal decision here for us, to the concerns that have been raised. And there's 4 kind of themes, and I'll talk to each one of them individually. So the first concern, and I just mentioned it, is that the distinct voices of each nursing group not be lost under one national association. So if the vote on the membership expansion is passed at the annual meeting on June 18th, 2018, that means it would be possible for regulated nurses in all categories to become members of the Canadian Nurses Association. But of course, determining those membership models would be a really, really important next step. So once after June and after we hear from the membership in June, and if it's positive and this moves ahead, then the Canadian Nurses Association will undertake a governance review to develop and evaluate the structures that need to be put in place to be inclusive of both the unique and collective needs of the different regulated nursing groups. And so one example might be creating advisory councils for each regulated category to hear all viewpoints along with an equitable governance structure that would ensure each group is fully included. And as part of that governance review, each of the different categories of nurses will be engaged, significantly engaged, to ensure their needs are identified and the ways to best support them are also identified. A unified structure would allow a focus on each member category and the ability to tailor specific projects and advocacy for that group, while at the same time marshalling the power of our numbers and our unity when a strong collective voice is required. So one example in nursing is the Royal College of Nursing in the United Kingdom, which successfully speaks for all nursing categories. There are special programs for the different groups, but they have strength in unity and they have strength in their numbers. Remember, any questions, please ask. I'll go to concern number 2. So, is this proposed expansion essentially about securing new revenue? So CNA is a not-for-profit organization, and revenues are used to support our work to advance nursing and health, and to provide our members with the programs and services they expect, and I'm going to say also need, from the Canadian Nurses Association or from a professional association. As with any organization, CNA requires stable revenues to survive and to thrive. We are stronger together and see efficiencies in collaborating and sharing our efforts. By creating a strong national and inclusive nursing body, nursing will gain a stronger advocacy voice for a sustainable healthcare system and for the health of Canadians and people living in Canada. Of course, a stable financial situation will support CNA to build and sustain the practice and educational programs nurses in all categories have been requesting and benefiting from. Concern number 3. How can CNA consider bringing all nurses under one professional association when some believe RN positions are being filled by nurses in other categories? CNA believes that Canadians deserve the right provider, delivering the right care at the right place and at the right time. CNA has always opposed the practice of employers replacing any care provider based purely on saving money, and we will continue to do so. It's CNA's duty to deliver evidence and advice to governments, to employers, and Canadians about how we safely deploy the right number and the right mix of nurses, and in what circumstances a specific category of nurse is warranted. Concern number 4, and the final one that seemed to be a theme in the feedback we received, was, will these membership changes impact the salaries, pensions, hours, and scope of practice of each of the regulated nursing categories? The proposed amendments to CNA's articles and bylaws do not touch at all upon the socioeconomic areas of nursing, such as pay, vacation time, etc. And as you know, scopes of practice are set out in provincial, territorial legislation and regulations, and they will not be affected by these proposed changes. The focus of what we're proposing is to become the professional voice of Canadian nursing, an association that advances the profession and influences the health and well-being of Canadians. So I'm going to stop again before I move to next steps. Any questions, Debbie, there?
There is none currently.
Okay. So the next steps then are that the proposed amendments to CNA's articles and bylaws will be presented at the annual general meeting on June 18th, 2018 in Ottawa. The voting delegates will be asked to vote on the proposed changes to the bylaws and the changes to the articles. As with any proposed amendments, there will be time allotted for voting delegates and members there, and I think online, to ask questions and to discuss the changes. And they'll remind us that a two-thirds majority will be required to pass the vote. This proposal is important, and it is a first necessary step. It sets the foundation, if you will. It gives that space. It allows us to have that space in which to then move ahead. At this time, we do not know what the membership structure will look like in the future. And as I mentioned, if the vote is passed on June 18th, the next important step would be determining the membership models through an extensive governance review. During the governance review, we will evaluate the structures we'd have to put in place to be inclusive of both the unique and the collective needs of the different regulated nursing groups. Between now and the annual general meeting, I invite you to read through the information package as well as the articles that are really well written in the Canadian Nurse magazine. For any voting delegates that happen to be on this webinar, I'd like to remind you there are upcoming further webinars in June specifically to outline the roles and responsibilities of voting delegates, and this does not replace that. Those are scheduled for June the 5th and June the 6th. So please note, as I said, that this does not replace those webinars. So if you have further questions, if you're a voting delegate, you're more than welcome to pose those questions either before the 5th and 6th or while we're on those webinars then. So wherever these developments take us, one thing in particular will always remain constant. CNA, the Canadian Nurses Association, will continue to represent, advocate for, and support the development of the nursing profession in Canada, and for you, our member. I know that I've shared a lot of information with you this afternoon, and I am really interested in opening this up now for dialogue. So if you've got questions, you want things clarified, or you want to just share your thoughts on various aspects of what I've touched on, I encourage you to either type them in right now, or I think we might open the line, Debbie, so people might be able to speak. And myself, Michael, Megan, others are more than happy to take questions right now. Michael, while we're waiting for that, is there anything you want to add? Because you've really been in serious dialogue and conversation with people across the country, with nurses across the country about this, this proposed amendment.
Thank you, Claire, and I really don't have anything to add. You've covered it really well. I think that it was important to acknowledge that we had a lot of voices of support, but we did have those themes of concern, and they're normal. It's a big change after 110 years, but I think you've addressed it really well, so I'm happy to just stay on the line and take questions or hear comments. Thanks, Claire.
So we do have Carolyn Park on the line who would like to ask a question.
Can you hear us,
Claire.
Carolyn?
Can you hear me?
Carolyn, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. My question is, and that was a very nice presentation, I must say. It was very clear, and I think it's a great idea, personally. But I'm wondering, do we have any idea about what these other organizations are thinking about this? do they think it's a great idea, the RPNs and the LPNs?
Michael, I'm going to let you field that question, if you will, and then I can add some comments after.
Sure, I'm happy to. Thanks, Carolyn. It's Mike Villeneuve here at CNA. We have spoken to groups where they exist. So as you know, Carolyn, it's been a bit of a, there's no consistent representation at the professional level for LPNs and RPNs across the country. So there is a small group in BC, the LPN Association in BC, and a new one was started for psych nurses there. But otherwise, they're mostly confined to regulatory bodies, except in Ontario, where the Registered Practical Nurses Association of Ontario has about over 14,000 RPN members. And I think, so I'll take a step back. First of all, we have demands from people from other categories for CNA services. For example, to write exams. And one of the ones you probably have heard about is LPNs asking to write specialty certification exams. So some of what propelled our board discussion and so on was that there is a demand for affiliation, for journal, for professional advocacy, and so on. I think that my sense from the groups across the country, so there's a number of reactions. Some are very, very positive. Some are, I would say, skeptical. It's not negative. It's let's see how this rolls out. So many of them are clamoring, I think, for the affiliation around the professional, the policy advocacy piece, Carolyn. So, for example, in BC, which is, as Claire explained, is one of the instigators, is not the right word, but one of the organizations that really propelled our thinking on this, they're very, very eager. So they voted, or they're in the process, there are 4 groups, RNs, NPs, LPNs, and psych nurses, of holding the votes to join together as a single professional association that very much wants to have representation within CNA. So the BC message has been really a ringing, loud endorsement. They're having some cold feet, as the votes get closer and so on, but they have some other issues going on, as you may know, in BC that has complicated things a little bit, but it's not about our representation with us. I'll give you another example because I don't think it's a private concern, is that representation in CNA should not do damage to any association that already exists. So, for example, where there's a large practical nurses association in Ontario, we don't want to, in a sense, rob all those members so that they join CNA and not continue their membership in the RPNAO. So we would work with Diane Martin and her team around what the membership structure would look like so that her membership remains strong, but her members have access to CNA. I did meet with the 4 registered psychiatric nurse regulators in a separate meeting, and I would say they're cautious in a prudent way, like not a negative reaction. I've met with each of them also at different times crossing the country individually, and I think they're all waiting to see what's the signal. Is CNA really serious? And I've heard that a few times. Let's see if you really do this. And then we'll think about the membership model and so on. I would say, Carolyn, to be most fair, most of what I heard has been pretty positive. Some of the negative is, we have to be honest as CNA RNs. We spent sometimes 50 or 60 years saying you don't get to be at the club. So people have been a little bruised by that. So we now have to think about how do you bring people into a structure which has never allowed them before. And carefully and do it so that, like we can't, BC's situation is going to be a good example. You can't bring everybody together under the one, still have 37,000 RNs that will overwhelm every vote on everything of those other groups. So I think they're looking to see what will that structure look like so that we have a reasonable equity around the board table and so on. So I don't know if that helps, but I would say my feeling going across the country overall is it's really quite positive among all the groups, and that we're trying to do our due diligence to answer concerns that have arisen. Does that help?
Thanks, Michael. that helps. I guess I was thinking in the back of my mind that we had a national, LPN organization and a national whatever else, and that
Carolyn,
not being the case, it makes it more complicated.
There has been a group called it's changed names a few times, but at one point, the practical nurses did have something like 9 out of the 13 jurisdictions in an association. The reality right now is that the National Association for LPNs exists only as a handful of members, only from BC.
Wow.
RPNAO in Ontario is not affiliated with it, and the psych nurses have kind of danced around it, and I don't mean that in a negative way. They've always been regulators, but the PNC, Psychiatric Nurses of Canada, used to have a little bit of a professional function, but in essence, this is a new thing for all of them, or for most of them, to join a professional national association, especially one with as much history and structure as CNA.
All right.
Madeline has her hand up.
Oh, yeah.
Madeline, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that was really well put. Both of you, Claire and Michael, and I think it's really valuable to have this information prior to the voting to really get people to understand it properly. I think it's obviously something which time is due, and it's an optimum time for this now. And I know we did have some concerns about, what if, say in Ontario, the RPNAO decided that they wanted to be the, provincial representatives on the boards and stuff, and obviously those sort of things could potentially arise, but there would be legal things. It wouldn't automatically happen. So I think some of the fears that people had could be allayed over this, but I think that it's a great idea, and thank you so much for providing the background and the explanation for everyone, so we're, voting in a very informed way.
Thank you, Madeline. And for those of you online who don't know, Madeline is one of our board members, and so was part of these discussions and these deliberations together. So thanks, Madeline.
The next question is with Mary Smith.
Okay, Mary.
Hi there. When I saw this email, I thought specifically for voting delegates, but I did share it with our board. But I see from the content you provided, Claire, that all our members would potentially benefit from this. So is this something that I can forward out as an FYI because there's another English webinar on May 17th, or be able to, when you have it recorded, be able to share it so that when we go to vote, we are truly voting on behalf of our collective voice in Manitoba?
I think both, Mary. Go for both.
Perfect.
As I said earlier, this is being recorded and will be posted, and so you could even use it in your own briefing as you get ready to go, if those people haven't been able to attend one, or fan it out for the Thursday.
Wonderful. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah,
there's
thanks,
a French
Mary.
one too, Mary, for your French members there.
Yes, absolutely. And that one's on the 18th, right? Yep. So we'll post those. We'll share those 2 dates on our Facebook and Twitter and things like that. That's great. I think this is, and I really appreciate how you've presented the information. I think it's exactly what people are wanting to hear. So that's great. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. And I think it's, that notion that it's a foundational piece, it actually opens space, that it gives us then the chance to move into the governance review, to consult, to speak, to talk about what kind of a structure do we need as we move forward.
Absolutely.
Collectively. So,
And as well, that may be reflected in where we as jurisdictional members will be going, potentially or not. We'll get a sense of what do our members want in that regard, even at the provincial jurisdictional level. So I think it's perfect. Thank you.
So Claire, your hand was up next.
Only because I was playing around, so ignore me. Sorry. I was looking to see if I could see the comments, but I can't. So, okay.
Just in case there are voting delegates on the line, I will clarify that there are two webinars being held in June to go over your roles and responsibilities, but they are scheduled for June 5th and June 11th, and you will get an official invitation on next Tuesday. You will get an official invitation with the instructions on how to join those.
And another opportunity, I think, as I said earlier, to ask some specific questions. Because while we're as a board and, you know, myself, I you know, really feel that this is the right direction. And I know Barb Shellyan is very supportive of it as well as the president. We really want it to be the right thing for the members, and the voting delegates at that meeting will represent those members. So they need to be able to exercise that responsibility in a good way and have all of the information that they need to make their decision as they move ahead. Any other questions or comments or anything else, Debbie, there? Any other hand up? Or
No?
Okay, well, we might be able to finish early then. I'm just going to make some closing comments. But before I do, Megan, is there anything that you want to say here?
I think everything's been covered brilliantly, and I have no additional wisdom to offer at this point.
Okay. So if anybody online does have a question, they're welcome to I think, email it or write it in to CNA, and Megan's always available to us to answer questions from a legal perspective, and she has some really, I think, strong wisdom around this. So, and thank you, Megan, for your guidance and your mentorship as we've moved along as a board here. So thank you again for the opportunity to share this with you and for engaging in this discussion today. As has been mentioned, we do have another session on Thursday, so please share that information, and we'll present the very same information as we did today. Some of your colleagues might be interested in that, so it's on May the 17th at 12:30 to 1:30 Eastern Time. There's also a session that's been scheduled with our board member, Sylvain, in Quebec. He's from Quebec, and on Friday, May the 18th, so this week from 12 to 1 Eastern Time. And then as Debbie reminded you, any voting delegates, you will join us again or be invited to join us again on the 5th of June and the 11th of June for your session on roles and responsibilities of voting delegates. So, no matter what the outcome of the upcoming vote, the Canadian Nurses Association, rest assured, will continue to represent, to advocate for, and to support the development of the nursing profession and for you, our member. So thank you very much for being here with us today, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.